Hi, my name is Roshni, and in this course we're going to learn basics. So we're going to start with the introduction and like an introduction to cooking and the basics of baking, like what things to invest in, how to measure your stuff correctly, what is worth investing in and what is not. We're going to learn how to make some comfort foods that are a little complicated. That include chocolate chip cookies, which is a recipe that I've tinkered with for a very, very long time and finally got right for this video, right in time for the video. And apple pie, and we're also going to make some mac and cheese from scratch. We're not going to be using the box mac and cheese. We're going to make the sauce and everything from scratch. And we're also going to be using the microwave to make some sweet and savory microwavable foods that you can eat as a snack, for dessert, or just as a meal if you're feeling lazy or tired. So it's a very, very, fun course. I had a lot of fun making the videos and cooking, and I hope you enjoy it. So in this video, we're going to be talking about the basics of baking and everything that I have in the video and everything that my mom taught me and that she learned from this huge book. It's that book. And it's huge. But it has a lot of really great recipes, and it tells you everything about the basics of baking, the basic needs for equipment when you bake or cook in the kitchen. So it starts off by telling us that so when you use eggs in baking, you use eggs in cake, in cupcakes, cookies, even meringues especially, you need your eggs at room temperature. It's easier to separate the eggs that way. And if you are making a meringue or you're making a really, really fluffy cake, a lot of the times the recipe will tell you to separate the yolk and the white. And for meringues, you need only the white. But for a cake, you will need the yolks. And for the cakes, it'll tell you to whip the whites separately. And if you have any tiny bit of fat or tiny bit of yolk in the white, it's not going to whip up. That's why when you make meringues, all the recipes and everyone tells you that you need an extremely clean bowl, extremely clean whisk and everything, or hand beat or whatever you're going to use. But you can't have any fat, any grease. The whites just won't whip up if you have the fat or the grease in it. So you should keep your eggs at room temperature. It's easiest to separate that way. And you can use your hands when you're separating the eggs. I use the shells, but that is a little more dangerous, and I have had times when the shell has pierced the yolk and the yolk has come into the white. So you can use your hands. That's definitely an easy way, as long as your hands are very clean. But a lot of the tricks and hacks on YouTube show them using water bottles, where you squeeze the water bottle and you get the yolk in the water bottle. That also works. The next thing is flour. So there's a lot of different types of flour, and I made this mistake so much when I was baking. Whenever I would measure out my flour, I would take my cup and I'd pack it into it. If you pack your flour into the cup, you get way more than you actually need, so your batter is going to be way drier and you're going to have a denser cake or a denser cookie, and it's just not going to be the way you want it. So the first thing is, when you measure your flour, if you are using cups and you're not using a scale, which you should be, you should definitely invest in a scale if you plan on baking or cooking on a regular basis, because using a scale it's easier and faster to measure, and it's also a lot more accurate. So a scale is definitely a worthwhile investment if you are considering baking for a long time. But if you are going to measure using a cup, you want to take your cup and add your flour in on top. And you can let it form a pie, let it form a mountain, and you take the flat end of a knife and you just push it off. So you're not packing in your flour and you're not getting more than you need. So that's definitely something I did a lot. And I always wondered why my cakes never rose properly, why they were so dense and hard. But it's because I was packing in my flour, and you should definitely not pack in your flour. If you are thinking of making bread, you do need this special type of flour. That's bread flour, obviously. And the book says that bread flour is made from a hard wheat, which contains a higher proportion of gluten. And so gluten, it's a protein, and when you knead your dough, you form strands of gluten. And when you make bread, because you're using yeast, the yeast forms carbon dioxide bubbles, and the strands of gluten will trap the carbon dioxide, which causes your bread to rise. So you need gluten when you make bread. So bread flour has a higher amount of gluten than regular flour does. Cake flour, on the other hand, has less gluten and is ideal for light, spongy cakes, like the cake you use when you make Victoria sponge, or if you're just making a regular sponge cake. You want a very fluffy and light cake, and one that's really nice and thick and spongy. So use cake flour because it's lighter than regular flour. Another thing I would suggest like investing in, if you want to say, but it wasn't that expensive, is a thermometer, candy thermometer. So I used to make caramel at home, like caramel candy, like the soft chewy caramel candies at home, and you have to reach either a soft ball or a hard ball stage when you make candy like that, and I would never get it right because I didn't have a candy thermometer. So I would definitely suggest getting a candy thermometer if you are going to make some type of candy or like caramel sauce. You want to use a thermometer so that your sugar doesn't burn. And if you cook steak or you cook like chicken breast, then there's like a certain temperature. So if you insert that thermometer into the breast or into the steak, there's a certain temperature at which your steak is medium rare, medium, or like well done. And for chicken breast, there's a certain temperature at which it's cooked. So you can get a moist, oh, everyone hates that word. You can get a moist chicken breast if you use the thermometer and use the correct temperatures. Another thing is when you measure like tablespoons and teaspoons, don't use the ones that you use at the table, like to eat with. Use proper measuring spoons, because the ones that you eat at the table, like different brands or different types, like from where you get your silverware, different places will have different sizes of spoons. So the amount of liquid or whatever that you're measuring with your spoon will vary for each recipe. And before I invested in proper measuring cups, I would use like a regular teacup that we use at home. Now, everyone says you shouldn't do that, but when I did it, my recipes turned out okay every single time, because every measurement that I was making with cups, it was like in the ratio of that cup size. So if it was half a cup, it was half a cup of the teacup, or if it was 1 cup, it was 1 cup of the teacup. I wasn't using like different types of cups for different cup measurements. I was just using the same cup, and then if it's at half a cup, I just fill it up halfway. So it seemed to work out for me. If you want to be more specific, you can, but if you're just starting out, then maybe don't like buy measuring cups, but definitely buy measuring spoons, especially for when you're measuring like things like vanilla extract or something. You don't want to add in too much, because then it'll just taste really bad. Vanilla extract does not taste that good, and neither does food coloring. It tastes horrible. And another thing is, when you use food coloring, the best type of food coloring to use is gel food coloring and not liquid food coloring, because if you're adding in liquid food coloring, you're also adding in liquid to your batter or into whatever you're making. That's just going to make it runnier. So a gel food coloring is extremely potent, extremely concentrated. You need very, very, very little to get a nice color. So I would definitely recommend getting gel food coloring. That's definitely the coloring to use. Another suggestion if you're baking is I would preheat the oven. I hated preheating my oven because I hate wasting electricity. So I would think like, my stuff's not in the oven yet, why am I keeping it on? So I would never preheat it, but it would always take way longer to cook because the oven would have to come to temperature and then the stuff would cook at that temperature. And if it was coming to temperature, sometimes the cake wouldn't rise properly and the cookies wouldn't brown properly. And sometimes because it had taken so long, I would get distracted and just like forget about it. So it would be in the oven and it would end up burning. So definitely preheat your oven if you are making something and the recipe calls for it. The recipe calls for it for a reason. I learned that the hard way. But you should definitely preheat your oven. So when you make a cake, you obviously want to frost it, right? You can either buy a store-bought Betty Crocker frosting, which tastes insane. It tastes so good. I used to eat it by a spoonful from the tub. Or you can make your homemade buttercream. So actually there are a few different kinds of frosting you can make. I've only tried two. I've tried buttercream and Swiss meringue buttercream. Buttercream is just a standard butter, sugar, vanilla extract, maybe a little bit of milk. And Swiss meringue is a little more complicated. You need like tempered eggs, and it involves cooking your eggs and the sugar on the stove so that it melts and forms kind of like a meringue, and you whip it to actually form the meringue, and then you slowly incorporate your butter. And Swiss meringue buttercream is more stable than a regular buttercream, and I like using Swiss meringue because in Bombay with the heat, if I want to take a cake to someone's house, I don't want the buttercream just like melting and my cake sliding all over the place. So I use Swiss meringue buttercream when I frost my cakes. And Swiss meringue buttercream also has a whiter color. And I like my cakes to be white, and then I can pipe in whatever color I want. So if you want a very, very white frosting, I would suggest using Swiss meringue buttercream. But for the standard buttercream, and even for Swiss meringue, you should use unsalted butter. I also hate spending excessive amounts of money. So I would always buy salted Amul butter because it was, easy and it was cheap and I could just get it from any store. But when I would make my buttercream, I'd have to add in so much sugar and so much vanilla extract just to offset a tiny bit of that salted butter flavor that you get when you eat butter on bread or anything. That classic butter flavor, you can, especially in salted butter, it really comes through if you don't add a lot of other stuff. So I would suggest buying unsalted butter. You can buy low pack or any other kind of unsalted butter. But use unsalted butter when making buttercream. And most recipes do call for unsalted butter. So you can also add in how much salt you want so that the amount of salt is in your control. So buy unsalted butter and use unsalted butter when making buttercream because that will definitely help the flavor of your buttercream. And for the longest time, I bought my vanilla extract from the store underneath, like not underneath my house, but it's like a few minutes away from my house. And that's good vanilla. It tastes fine, but it has a weird aftertaste. And when I went to my cousin's house, they live in the US, and I tried the vanilla at their house and like a vanilla cake or like a milkshake. I forgot what it was, but I had the vanilla at their place. It was so much better. There was no weird aftertaste. You could actually taste the vanilla, and it was really, really good. It was pretty not very expensive, but it was on the more expensive side. But if you are making stuff like vanilla ice cream or just whipped cream or even for your buttercream, you want really, really good quality vanilla because you don't want it to have a weird aftertaste. You don't want it to taste bad, especially in buttercream. If you're doing vanilla buttercream or vanilla cake, that's the main flavor. So you want it to be a good quality vanilla extract. And I didn't find this here. I could only find it in the US. So if you want it, you might have to ask someone in the US, or you could probably find it on Amazon. I'm sure you could find it on Amazon. And I also think that a worthwhile investment is buying vanilla bean paste. It gives you those, because vanilla beans themselves are so expensive. It's outrageous. I would never spend the money buying the actual whole beans. I would only buy the paste because the paste is just the beans have their seeds scraped and removed, and you have the seeds put into a huge jar, and that's the jar you buy. It's just the seeds, which is all that you actually use. But I would suggest buying vanilla bean paste. It's a really, really, really good investment. It tastes absolutely fabulous. And when you have like whipped cream or buttercream, when you have those little specks of, vanilla in it, it looks really nice. And it's just satisfying to look at. Now, this does sound like a conceited kind of thing to, like, you buy it only because it looks good, but it does taste very good. It adds a great flavor to anything that you make. And again, if your flavor is vanilla, you want good quality vanilla in the recipe.